This episode of Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. Martini Coffee Roasters is not a martini-flavored coffee. In fact, it is a family-owned and operated company run by the Martini family. And while I'm sure they enjoy a good cocktail, they are all about that high-quality, smooth, flavorful coffee. Unlike many other roasters, Martini Coffee Roasters roast manually using a traditional method of roasting, most relying on sight and sound to ensure the best results, okay? This is quality, people. This is artisanal. This is handmade. This is what you're wanting. And not only that, but they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. So please support small businesses and check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com. Once again, check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast.
That's right.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are excited to have you here.
Absolutely.
And feel free to follow us on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We're on Facebook, and within our Facebook, we also have a smaller group called Citizens of the Milky Way.
That's right.
Anyone's welcome to join that. And if you are looking for other ways to support this podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, recommend it to a friend. These things really add up, and we so appreciate it. We also have a Patreon. If you are looking for more Creep Street content, we have bonus episodes as well as other just fun Creep Street content. You can check that out at patreon.com/creepstreet. And we've got 3 tiers there, and we love all 3 tiers.
Oh, yeah.
But today, I think we need to give a shout out to our top tier.
That's right.
Dylan, will you please?
Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish face via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bonebreaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, and the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli.
Good God, that gets my blood pumping.
Absolutely.
Like hardcore.
Oh, yeah.
Hardcore throbbing. If you would like to be like those throbbing members, please feel free to check out patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast.
That's right.
So this is actually our second Creep Street episode of this week.
That's right. We're putting out 2 this week.
That's right. We had our bonus episode surprise drop on, what was that, Monday?
Monday, yes.
Yes. Thank you guys for listening to that. We've gotten a great response from people. Thank you guys for listening and for the positive remarks. We are so happy to hear them.
Absolutely.
We did get some messages of other Filipino folklore or other monsters or fill in the blank, really.
Yes. Shout out to Maui Reyes for that email. Tons of great stuff.
Yes, that was great. We so appreciate it. So please feel free to keep it coming at all times, of course, but especially now because, you know, it's on our minds. Please feel free.
All right. Well, why don't we get to it?
Dylan, what are we even talking about today? What are we even doing here? Like, what's going the F on?
Let's just say today's episode is going to be timeless.
Okay, that's
because
good.
We're talking about time slips.
I'm about to have the time of my life.
That's right. Now, very quickly, let me hit you with these sources. My first was an article called The Moberly Jourdain Incident. In 1901, 2 female academics claimed to have experienced a time slip into pre-revolutionary France by Boban Dostoevsky.
That's another example of how headlines are insane nowadays.
Yep.
Absolutely absurd. They're novellas.
Boban Dushevsky at thevintagenews.com. The second is Mysterious Time Slips on a Liverpool Street by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. A Ghost at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania Hall and Civil War Medicine by MB Henry at mbhenry.com. And The Man from Laxaria at thefoundrycast.com.
Very slick. I'm jazzed to get into this today.
This is a weird topic.
So weird.
It's kind of easy to understand, yet so nebulous at the same time. Now, let's make it clear exactly what we're talking about.
Yes, please.
Time slips are exactly as the name sounds, one slipping through time. Say you're walking down a street in Chicago here, it's 2021, you take a corner, suddenly it's Prohibition era Chicago. That would be like an example.
Would be cool, but bad, though. I wouldn't want that.
Right. But up top, let's just differentiate the difference between time slips and time travel. Now, obviously, in both, a person travels through time. The difference is that with time travel, it is done intentionally, whether by science or whatnot. Time slips are completely at random and accidental, and that's why they tend to be looked at as more of a paranormal phenomenon.
This is also different than losses of time or time gaps.
Yes.
Whereas that's a whole other thing that we could do an episode on, but that's more so with aliens. This has come up with in a couple things, like I think Rendlesham Forest, this came up in a few other of our episodes, but basically you feel like we're only somewhere for 5 minutes, but it turns out there's 3 hours completely unaccounted for that you can't explain. You don't know what was going on. A little different than what we're talking about today.
Good point. That's actually a really good point. Now, theories obviously abound as to what's actually happening when someone has one of these incidents happen to them. Now, because it's such a misunderstood thing and we don't know much about it, pretty much any theory is going to be as valid as the next one because we just don't know. Is it paranormal? Is it something scientific that we just don't know yet? Or
that's basically what the paranormal is.
It's basically what the paranormal is.
Yeah.
This is one of those, it's very loose, so there's not much to really explain about what they are because, like I said, the name kind of explains it.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to read some stories, ones that are kind of varied.
Yeah.
They're not all exactly the same, and we're going to try to, maybe at the end, kind of posit what we might think it is.
Love that.
Perhaps one of the most famous accounts of a time slip happened in Versailles, France.
Oh.
It was August 10th, 1901, and visiting Versailles were two British academics by the name of Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain. Now, Charlotte and Eleanor, they were on a tour of the Palace of Versailles. They started to get a little bored on their tour, so they broke off from the rest of the group, went for a little walk on the palace grounds.
Ooh, a little bit of Bad Girls. I like it.
Now, the gardens around the palace were gorgeous, so they wanted to see them, and also they wanted to go see a specific chateau called the Petit Trianon, which was located in the southeast of the palace in a park called Grand Trianon. Now, just to give you a little backstory about this manor, the chateau.
Yeah.
It was originally built sometime between 1762 and 1768 during the reign of Louis XV. But what the chateau is most famous for is that it was later given as a gift by Louis XVI to his young wife, Marie Antoinette.
There she is, baby.
So when Charlotte and Eleanor reached the Grand Trianon Park, the entrance was closed off. And they had a guidebook with them to sort of help them find their way to the chateau, but now they kind of had to take a different route. And along the way, they got lost. Well, they're trying to find their way. They take a wrong turn down an alley. They miss the manor entirely. So they're walking down this alley when suddenly things just felt wrong.
Oh, God.
Charlotte and Eleanor both each felt this feeling of sadness and oppression. They couldn't explain it. You know, they didn't say it to one another, but they both just felt it. Side note, now, what is interesting about this case and why it's so often associated with the paranormal is that both Charlotte and Eleanor, while they did have the same experience, they didn't always see the same things, even though they were walking right side by side.
Oh, wow. Weird.
Now, both of them did travel to the same era of time, as we'll see. But like I said, sometimes they would both see the same things. Sometimes one would see something the other couldn't. Or sometimes they'd both see the same things, but it would be very different in their description.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Okay.
So Charlotte looks over and she sees a woman in the window of some home, and the woman she saw was waving a white cloth. I don't know if she was doing laundry or whatnot, but there was just something strange about the woman, not in terms of her behavior, but that she just seemed out of place.
Right.
Eleanor also looked over. She saw an old abandoned farmhouse, and out front of it was an old plow. She hadn't remembered seeing that before, and this farmhouse looked really decrepit, like it was a couple hundred years old. It looked old. That's when they noticed two men up ahead. Now, Charlotte, her description of these men originally was that they appeared to maybe be palace gardeners. Just a side note, Charlotte would later change her description of the men they encountered, describing them as, quote, very dignified officials dressed in long grayish-green coats with small three-cornered hats. They approached the men, and they seemed friendly enough, except they also just seemed out of place. They asked the men for directions to the chateau, and they pointed them straight ahead to the north. So they just kept walking, and they passed by an old cottage, and standing in the doorway of the cottage, Eleanor noticed a woman standing with a young girl in the doorway. But Eleanor had a bad feeling in her stomach. There was something off about them. They didn't seem real. Almost like they were wax sculptures.
Oh.
And this is what Eleanor said.
Everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry. There were no effects of light and shade, and no wind stirred the trees.
Interesting.
Weird.
Very interesting.
So it's like they're...
It's almost like...
it's like a drawing or like a set? Or,
right. It's almost like when this happens sometimes, it's like they're in a set.
Yeah.
Now, not every experience when I tell other stories is like this, but that was what I thought was weird. It almost seemed like they were seeing something staged.
Right.
The next encounter was one both women would experience. Sitting by a garden kiosk was a strange man wearing a cloak and a large shady hat. Both women were immediately struck with fear. Eleanor described the man, saying,
The man slowly turned his face, which was marked by smallpox. His complexion was very dark. The expression was evil and yet unseeing. And though I did not feel that he was looking particularly at us, I felt a repugnance to going past him.
Weird.
Interesting.
And I get this feeling. Not that I'm saying I've experienced this exact thing, but I think all of us have gotten that just kind of gut feeling when maybe someone walks by or when you see someone and you just kind of know, I'm not going to mess with this person.
It's not like how they're dressed. It's nothing like that. Sometimes you'll pass someone.
Yeah.
And if you were to see them on video, they would look like any other person acting normal, but you get a vibe. You get a weird vibe. Well, and they don't even speak. Like, you just walk by and it's almost like a sense, like you feel an aura.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we were walking Banshee, our dog, just a few nights ago.
Yeah.
And there was just this man that I don't even know. He just was like a middle-aged man. There wasn't really anything like that scary about him or anything.
He wasn't like wearing anything freaky or...
Yeah, but we didn't talk about it at the time, but we all got this really bad feeling. And I say we all, meaning me, Dylan, and Banshee, we did. But she talked to us too. But for real though, Banshee immediately went to the edge of the grass to be as far away from him as possible. And then I just put all my attention on Banshee, pretending I didn't even notice this guy. So I was like, oh, Dylan, look, Banshee's going over here, hoping that if I just didn't even acknowledge his presence at all, that was the best way to not engage. I don't know. I just was I need to not be near this person.
Well, and also there was another guy standing nearby who was minding his own business. He had just had headphones in.
Yeah.
He wasn't with that guy. He wasn't with us. And I remember distinctly noticing when the scary guy passed by him, this is a guy with his headphones on, I remember he kind of even looked up.
Yeah, he did the same thing. My heart is feeling really weird and uncomfortable thinking about it.
I know.
Yeah, so I know this is different because it's involved with a time slip. I know with a time slip it's different, but yeah, sometimes you just get that feeling about someone. Right. Oh, that's so scary.
So finally they get to this manor house, Petite Trianon. Charlotte noticed a woman sitting in the grass in front of the manor. She had a little sketchbook she was sketching. And the woman certainly seemed out of place. Charlotte thought perhaps she was a tourist visiting the palace as well. And later she described the woman as wearing a summer dress. She had long hair and wore a white hat. She would realize that this woman was none other than Marie Antoinette herself.
The Marie?
The Marie. Strangely enough, Eleanor never saw Marie Antoinette.
Weird.
And like I said, we'll keep going into the story. This is kind of what's unique about the story. Typically, whether it was a hoax or not, you would think two people with differing stories would be grounds for dismissal.
Right.
Like, oh, this is clearly a hoax. But what's interesting about this is it seems like the point was they saw different things.
Right. That's so bizarre that they saw different things.
And like they would share their stories with each other and be like, wow, well, I saw. It wasn't like they were trying to collab or like.
Right.
In fact, it was quite.
It wasn't affecting each other's stories. They weren't like, oh, I guess I did see that. They're
That's
like,
what's
no,
unique about it.
Also, shout out Marie Antoinette. She was mentioned in our royal inbreeding episode.
That's right.
She's got that Habsburg jaw, baby, but she made it work for herself, and she was hot.
Well, as suddenly as it had begun, the time slip seemed to be done. Right as both women entered the manor, it was like it was modern day again. But they just joined up with the rest of the tour they had left before. They were very shaken, though, and neither of them spoke out loud about it, even to each other, for about a week.
Wow.
Finally, they confided in one another, and it was kind of, I think Charlotte first broached the subject, and it was like one of those things. It was Eleanor. It was clear like they had both just wanted to talk about it for a week,
but they were like someone had to bring it up, and
exactly because they were also afraid that the other person would think they were nuts, And they both agreed this was something paranormal in nature. Now, as we know, they didn't always see the same things, yet they would walk side by side. They would go back and try to find the path they had walked, but to no avail. Many of the landmarks that they had passed by were no longer there.
Wow.
Now, both of them being academics, Charlotte and Eleanor dived into research of the area. And of course, that date, August 10th, I guess had a special significance. On August 10th, 1792, the Tuileries Palace had been surrounded and the King's Guard all killed. And within 6 weeks, the monarchy of France no longer existed.
That's right.
This was kind of like somewhat of an anniversary for a defining historical moment.
Kind of was the beginning of the very end of the monarchy.
Absolutely. So a decade after their experience, in 1911, Charlotte and Eleanor actually published a book called An Adventure. And they both wrote the book using aliases. They didn't originally use their real names, but even though everything in it was their...
Right.
But nonetheless, they claimed what they had experienced was real.
That story is so cool. I would really love to dive deeper into it. But it does make sense, though, that maybe there would be a time slip there or some kind of activity there because, we've said this time and time again, an area or a place that has a bunch of emotion, intense emotion attached to it, especially negative emotion, is kind of breeding ground for like a residual haunting or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that maybe something like this would happen there too.
Well, you remember that freaky guy sitting by the garden kiosk?
Yeah, what's his deal?
Later, they believe that might have been, forgive me, I know I'm going to say this name wrong. They believed that he was actually Comte de Vaudreuil. He was a very close member of King Louis XVI's court, and apparently a favorite of Marie Antoinette.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure I said that name wrong, but...
No, that's okay. I don't know, but I am remembering this from Marie Antoinette, the Sofia Coppola movie.
Now, later in 1965, French poet Robert de Montesquieu offered up a theory as to what maybe Charlotte and Eleanor may have seen back in 1901. And who knows, this I just thought was pretty clever. Now, when he published this book in 65, he was a very old man at the time, but around the time of 1901, Montesquieu was renting an apartment right by the palace grounds near where the manor Petit Trianon was. He would often throw lavish parties with many guests. Sometimes these parties would have a theme. Sometimes guests would come dressed up as famous people throughout history. The theory is perhaps this was a party guest dressed as Marie Antoinette that Charlotte saw. But then again, why did Eleanor not see her?
And why was she just sitting by herself in the grass sketching at a party?
Right. Even if that happened, why did Eleanor not see her?
That's very odd.
And then, of course, everything else they saw, too.
Interesting
theory, but probably not. But I just thought, that's clever. It would be funny if that was if it was just an elaborate party.
Funny. That is actually a great idea. It's kind of like The Village, but if it was a comedy.
Yeah.
Which maybe is something we should make. I do get, though, that idea, first of all, because it kind of makes sense, but also because it does feel like so on the nose that one of them would see Marie Antoinette.
Well, now I'm going to give you a few stories that take place in one location.
Oh, I like that.
We're leaving France now.
Of what?
Apparently, one of the most active places in the world in terms of reports of time slips is in Liverpool, England.
Really? Not what I was expecting you to say, but I guess we all just want to see those 4 lads from Liverpool.
That's right. The majority of these time slips happen on a specific street called Bold Street.
Oh, okay.
Brief history here about Bold Street. It stretches from Clayton Square to the Church of St. Luke. I guess it's mostly closed off to vehicles. It's said to be very charming. Today, it's, a lot of cafes, shops, bars,
Sounds nice.
Sounds very nice. And there's actually interesting history surrounding it. It was originally designed as something called a rope walk. These were narrow lanes that were made for materials that would be laid out and then twisted into rope. Often these ropes, they were assembled for ships and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there you go.
And I guess back in the day, they would make these little alleys where they could lay out the rope and then twist it.
Oh, so it's like a little alley for rope.
Then of course, as time went on, Bold Street started to turn into a residential area.
Right.
Obviously it's not that anymore. But that's probably part of the reason why it's kind of closed off to cars, because it's kind of small. It's more of like a walking street.
That's cool. I love that. We don't have that in America. All our streets are big, dude.
Well, as time went on, Bold Street started to turn, like I said, into a residential area. By the late 18th century, it had started to become its own little business hub there in Liverpool. Today, like I said, popular spot for shops and meeting friends and getting a bite to eat.
Quick shout out to our listeners in Liverpool. We have a few, and we
do.
So appreciate you guys.
Take a selfie on Bold Street and tag us in it. Please take a photo, take a selfie, tag us in it. We'll share it in our story.
Please.
We'll share it in our Insta story. So Bold Street, of course, also has garnered a bit of a reputation for the unexplained.
Yeah. I mean, with all this rope around.
So in the 1980s, one woman was having lunch in a shop on Bold Street.
Did not think you were going to say lunch.
It was a nice sunny day outside. People were coming and going every which way, like you'd expect. She was eating when suddenly it kind of got dark outside, almost like a cloud had covered up the sun. She looked back out the window, and strangely, almost all of the passerbys outside were gone. And this is, pretty busy street.
Yeah.
It's downtown Liverpool. It's, there'd be people walking.
Right.
It's lunchtime. The people that did remain, though, seemed to be dressed in clothing almost reminiscent of the 1950s. The woman then looked over, and sitting next to her was a very nicely dressed man. And this man, not only was he in 50s-like clothing, but the entire shop she was in had been turned into like a 50s aesthetic.
Wow, very, very Back to the Future.
She's obviously without words. I would imagine probably in this moment, you're not even horrified. It's literally like your brain probably doesn't even have an emotion almost.
I'm sure, yeah, I think you're just like trying to compute, I think that's really what's just going on.
The nicely dressed stranger started to strike up a conversation with her, and she did her best to just kind of go along, but she's like looking around, what's going on?
I wonder if he thought she looked weird.
When she looked back out the window, once again, it looked like modern day, though.
What?
And when she turned back to the man, he was gone, and the shop was back to normal.
That is crazy. Wow.
Weird.
That is so weird that it was that quick, too. Just a few seconds, really.
Another incident occurred when a woman named Imogen, she went to Bold Street. She was looking for a gift for her sister's baby shower. And luckily, she found a baby supply store called Mother Care.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect. She went inside and was very pleasantly surprised at how cheap everything was. And it was like good quality stuff. So she grabbed everything she needed.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
it was checking out at the register.
Bulk up.
And the cashier, very friendly, was so puzzled when she handed her her credit card. The cashier acted like she didn't know what the hell a credit card was and that they only took cash at this establishment.
Weird.
So Imogen, she got cash, paid it, and went on her way. And later she was telling her mother about the weird experience she had, and her mother was confused, saying that Mother Care hadn't been on Bold Street in years.
That's so weird.
In fact, a bank had been in its place for a long time. Well, Imogen was like, no way. So she grabbed her mom and she took her down to Bold Street to show her herself. And when they got there,
Stop.
The store was gone and it was only a bank.
That's so crazy. But she was able to buy those things?
She was able to buy those things.
And those things stayed?
I'm assuming so.
That's crazy. And also, too, that they took the money. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I wonder if the shopkeeper just didn't look at the money. Or I wonder if maybe after she left, she looked at the money and it looked crazy.
Now, these next two stories are probably the two most famous when it comes to Bold Street.
Oh my God, the street.
This first one happened on a warm, sunny day in 1996. A man named Frank was out shopping with his wife, Carol. They were headed to Bold Street to visit a favorite bookstore of theirs called Waterstone.
Shout out Waterstones if you're still there.
The bookstore was just up the street. They could see it from where they were. They were walking and they bumped into a friend of Frank's. Carol went on ahead. Frank said, I'll meet you at the store. Frank chatted with his pal a little bit and they had a good laugh and then parted ways, and it was only like a couple minutes.
Right.
He was right behind Carol. And when Frank turned to head towards the bookstore, he suddenly realized he didn't recognize his surroundings. It was Bold Street, but it looked different than it did literally moments ago.
That's so weird.
He went to where he was certain the Waterstone's bookstore was, but he couldn't find it. And Frank was a former policeman, so he knew the area very well. He had patrolled it.
Oh, I would be so afraid that I'd be like stuck, you know?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So he looks around and he realizes not only the street looked different, but so did everything else. The people coming and going had all like 50s era clothes. The vehicles all were 50s looking. And a sign was hanging over the entrance of what should have been Waterstone's bookstore that read Crips. And in the window was women's clothing, shoes, accessories, and all of them, of course, in 1950s style. Mm-hmm. So it was clearly like a woman's like clothing store. And that's when Frank noticed a woman standing near the entrance of this store. She was dressed in more modern clothing. And on her face, she had the same mystified, confused look. And the moment they saw each other, they both realized they were experiencing the same thing. They didn't even say a word to each other. They just looked. Oh my God. And when they saw the look in each other's eyes, they just knew, what the hell? They didn't even say a word to each other.
Oh my God, that's crazy. She's probably like, I'm wearing pants.
Right. So the two of them slowly entered into this store together, Crips. And as they entered, the interior of the store was modern day Waterstone's bookstore.
Oh my God.
Carol was in there. Everyone in there was dressed in modern clothing of 1996. Pearl Jam t-shirts and ripped jeans.
Oh yeah.
Outside, Bold Street had gone back to normal as well.
Wow.
Both were shocked, obviously. They had no explanation for what happened. But Frank would do a little research and find out that Crips had been a popular dressmaking shop that closed in the 1970s.
I can't believe that two people had that same experience together.
Isn't that wild?
That just randomly.
Here's maybe my favorite one.
My God.
This one's pretty wild. This happened in 2006, and the source just says the guy's name was Sean. But Sean was on Bold Street, and he was there with the intent to shoplift.
Uh-oh, Sean.
Well, he was doing a little shoplifting, and a security guard caught him in the act, so Sean had to run for it, and the security guard was chasing him. Sean turned down an alley to find out he'd hit a dead end.
Oh.
He was like, crap. So he turns around, expecting the security guard to be right behind him, but he wasn't there. He made his way back to the main road to find that everything looked different. People were dressed in what looked like 1960s clothing.
What?
And when he passed by a newspaper stand, he noticed a date on that day's paper read May 18th, 1967.
Oh.
He tried using his cell phone, of course, didn't work. The guy was so confused, he didn't know what to do. He just kind of walked into a jewelry store he saw called H. Samuel. And when he exited the store a few minutes later, everything was back to normal. And here's a couple interesting points.
Yeah.
When he looked at his watch, it showed that no time had passed at all.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what's very interesting. The security guard that was chasing him, he didn't go through a time slip.
Right.
But he would say he was right behind Sean when suddenly he vanished right before his eyes.
Oh my God, that's so wild. This is like The Leftovers.
It kind of is.
Great show on HBO if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. It really does seem like that. This is crazy. I mean, did you just go in and just like, I don't know, ask if Paul McCartney was there?
I guess. It would have been the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the more terrifying cases of a time slip happened in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Now,
here we go.
Gettysburg is a unique topic all its own. U.S. listeners will know Gettysburg, the site of the bloodiest battle in the American Civil War.
Yes.
There's been no shortage of paranormal reports coming out of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
I've even been there myself. I even did a ghost tour.
I know. That sounds so fun. I want to go.
I think more than most, this story really highlights the sort of paranormal nature of the phenomenon. And this is one we'll debate. Was this time slip or was this more of a very elaborate haunting?
Okay.
So it's two college administrators at Gettysburg College. They were leaving work late one night. The building they worked in was called Old Dorm. and it was one of the few original buildings at the college. They worked on the 4th floor, and it was after hours, so they were the only ones still there, except for maybe security guards, stuff like that. Building's pretty dark. They go to the elevator, get in. They hit the button for the 1st floor. They're just chatting like you would.
Yeah,
And they notice the elevator goes past the 1st floor and just keeps going. They push the 1st floor button again, but elevator just keeps going to the basement.
Oh my God, you guys.
Where it finally stops.
No, shut it down.
Now, in this basement was what you'd expect to be in a college building basement. Storage for filing cabinets, paperwork, boxes, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when the elevator doors opened, what the women saw was an absolute nightmare. The basement was piled, full of gore, amputated limbs, and the bodies of men, both living and dead. They wailed in pain and rage. Doctors and medical staff wearing what looked like Civil War-era clothing were covered head to toe in blood, tending to the soldiers. Some were sawing off limbs and restraining patients.
Oof.
The women screamed and burst into tears, falling back into the elevator. They pounded on the button to try and get the elevator to go.
Whoa.
One of these Civil War doctors turned and seemed to notice them. And it says he had such a tired and distraught look on his face. He began to approach the women with his arms outstretched, almost pleading for help.
Oh.
Finally, the elevator door shut and went to the 1st floor. The women ran to the security guard who was on duty that night and tried to, they're screaming, they're crying,
Right.
He's trying to understand what they saw. So he, whatever it was, he believed him. He got on the elevator. He was pretty nervous himself.
Yeah.
Whatever it was scared the hell out of these women. So he was very scared himself. He hits the button and rides it down to the basement. And when the doors open, it was the usual campus basement. Now, sightings of ghostly apparitions and stuff, very common. Was this a time slip? Especially in Gettysburg. So, was this a time slip or just a very powerful paranormal display?
That is so scary. Oh my God. I can't even imagine how frightening that must have been.
Exactly.
I do think at first I thought maybe it was a residual haunting. But the thing about residual hauntings is that they don't interact with the living person that is witnessing it.
Right.
It's like a residual haunting it's not like it's a ghost that has come back.
Exactly.
It's like it's this extreme thing, this energy that is just still there. The fact that this doctor saw them though, and interacted with them, that makes me think it was more either going along the time slip lines or I don't even know.
Some sort of
like an intelligent haunting.
Exactly.
Mixed with a residual haunting. I don't even know.
So like I said at the beginning, because time slips are so spontaneous and unexplainable, almost any theory is valid. So is this time travel? Is this a haunting that is capable of manifesting an entire scenery, like an entire surrounding?
Right.
Or is this something interdimensional?
Pop off, King.
One interesting theory is that it might be both an interdimensional slip and time slip. So let's look at Charlotte and Eleanor's story. Let's say they really did see Marie Antoinette at Petit Trianon. Was it the same Marie Antoinette from this reality's history?
Oh, damn.
Maybe it was Marie Antoinette from a dimension where things turned out differently. Maybe history played out differently. Maybe in very big ways. This sounds weird. Here's a story that sort of leans into that notion. This happened in a small village outside of Frankfurt, Germany in September of 1850. The village residents noticed a strange man wandering around the village like he was lost. So the authorities came, picked him up, and brought him in to see if there was anything he needed. He spoke in a broken form of Old German, and it was clear German wasn't his first language. The man said that his name was Jofar Voren, and that he had come from a country called Laxaria.
Oh.
Well, no one had heard of Laxaria,
what is that?
They questioned him further. He explained that Laxaria was a country on the continent of Sakria, and that Sakria was separated from where they currently were by a big ocean. Now, obviously, the police are confused, but the guy wasn't drunk or under the influence. Surely they thought he was crazy, but when he told them about who he was, he just seemed so earnest.
Right.
And it was also clear to the visitor, to this guy, that the police had no idea of what he was talking about, which was weird for him. He was also like, what do you mean? He explained there were 5 continents: Sakria, Aflar, Astar, Auslar, and Uplar.
Wait, this is bizarre.
He said he was traveling across the ocean by ship to reconnect with his brother when he was involved in a shipwreck, and he wound up here. As we said, German was clearly not the man's first language, but he also couldn't speak any other European language. He explained that his native language that he read and wrote in was Laxarian, and that he was also fluent in Abramian, which he explained was a written language used by the clerical order of Laxaria.
What?
He explained that his religion was a form of Christianity called Ep67. He had no idea where the shipwreck occurred or how he wound up in Germany. After much observation by scholars in Frankfurt, he was deemed not insane. So they sent him to Berlin for more questioning. But along the way, sources say that Jofar suddenly went into a hysterical fit and ran off into the woods, never to be seen again.
What?
So many wonder, was this man from a different timeline? Perhaps one where the outcomes of big wars were different. And so, it created a different future with different borders and different languages. There are other incidents, sort of like this, which is kind of another topic, which are people from nowhere, people who claim to be from a place that doesn't exist. And I don't mean from like other planets, but places on Earth.
Right, yeah.
Which will be its own subject. Is it possible that time slips are actually other realities?
That totally makes sense. And it's interesting that there was still Christianity, though. So, wherever he came from, if a different dimension or reality or whatever was maybe split off within the past, 2,000 years or whatever. I don't know. That's so weird. And how scary would that be?
Freaky, right?
Just all of a sudden you're in a place where no one even knows. Like, I can't even put it into words how frightening and scary that would be.
That would be horrifying.
You have no way of even showing what you mean.
Right.
Like, these people just can't even understand what you're talking about.
Right.
And you're just alone.
It's hard to even fathom what...
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking about, too, with some of these other ones that would be so scary if this happened to me, and at least once I, got my bearings about the situation, am I stuck here now? How do I get back?
How do I go home?
Because if that just happened to you and you were stuck, that would be terrible. You wouldn't have, a social security number.
Exactly.
How would you even survive?
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's even just if you went back, 30, 40, 50 years or something.
Right, exactly.
What if you go back, hundreds and hundreds of years? You're probably going to die of some virus or something.
Right.
That's
he could
crazy.
bring, there's nothing said. Maybe there's a virus that didn't exist. He could bring a virus from a different timeline.
What do you think is going on?
I'm not really sure if time is what we really understand it to be.
Yeah.
And if time and interdimensions are really kind of one and the same. If time and reality are actually like an intertwined thing, it's not like a separate thing.
Right.
So I would be more curious as to this whole interdimensional idea.
Yeah, I kind of am with you there too. And I don't really understand anything about time. Like when people say, from True Detective, people are like, time is a flat circle. I just don't get it. And it's been explained to me 10,000 times. It's just not going to happen for me. I'm not going to understand it. I do think that there is something different about time, and that I don't think time, it's not the way we think it is.
Exactly.
I don't have an explanation of what I think it is. I literally have no idea. But I do think maybe this residual haunting situation is interesting.
True too. The Gettysburg one, I'm not sure if that was just straight haunting.
I almost think the first story, the one at Versailles, that one sounded like a residual haunting to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just they were seeing different things because for whatever reason their brains or whatever, that was just what they were able to pick up and see.
Whereas Bold Street, that sounds to me like the most pure time slip.
I agree. Yeah. That one also comforts me a little bit because it seems like those ones are very quick.
Yeah.
And you kind of just change your location, like you enter a building or something, and then you're back in your time, 2021 or whatever. So that makes me feel less anxious about this happening.
Exactly.
And also, I agree. I think that seems to be the most pushed into another reality. Yeah, if you guys have heard of any stories or if anything kind of similar has happened to you, let us know. A reminder to our homies in the UK, especially the ones in or near Liverpool.
Yes.
If you could take a photo or a selfie, we would love it.
Absolutely.
We want to check it out. We'll come to Liverpool at some point and
Absolutely.
try to slip through time.
Absolutely. All right, citizens of the Milky Way, that is going to wrap it up for Time Slips.
Oh man, thank you, Dylan, for doing all of that crazy research.
Of course, if you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast. My name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Citizens of the Milky Way, good night and goodbye.
Bye.